always willing to give ideas and solutions to the problems. And I would hate to see us lose any more good people, because in Precinct 4, we've lost a lot. And, you know, what can you say? They've got to take care of their families. But thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you, Prophet.
I want to echo purchasing department's comments about how good y'all look before I get started. So I'm going to talk a little bit. Road and Bridge talked about salary stuff. That's not going to be the purpose of mine as much. I'm going to talk a little bit about what we need. I'm going to talk, but before we get to that, I'm going to talk a little bit about what's happened over the past couple of years. So in front of you, you have a packet that's here. There's one for everybody that's up there. That is not the PowerPoint slides. These are things to look at afterwards if you have questions. So the letters, the articles, the research and things like that, that's all there. So if you have questions later, you can look at those. And then if you need to come back or if you have questions, I'm more than willing to answer those. So I want to start back at the beginning of the pandemic. While the world shut down, we kept going. We started back court proceedings by Zoom in June of 2020, when most of these bigger cities were still at home, no courts happening. And along with that, in August of 2020, we went back to trials. So we started trials, we were doing COVID protocols and procedures, took a little bit of a break in January and February of 2021, but we were back in March of 2021. So what I wanted to do was kind of start from about March 2021 to now to kind of talk about where we've been and some of the things that we have been doing at this point. The pandemic, pre-pandemic, pandemic, and post-pandemic performance for us, we like to measure that in terms of cases that we are moving. We're right at about 109% efficiency, which basically means that we are cutting into our backlog. We're taking in more, we're disposing of more cases than we're taking in. That doesn't mean that crime stopped at all when the pandemic started, but we're still trying to be efficient with the people that we have and the cases that we have. Along with that, our courts are in trial every other week. So all three courts are in trial at the same time. It creates a kind of a collective surge in our office in terms of kind of stress level, because the cases that we have are serious cases that we deal with. And so everybody's going to trial at the same time. And so we've been very busy during the pandemic and now here in Brazos County. But along with us, we are not immune nationwide from the struggles that everyone is having. This is a Reuters article that talks about, from April 13th, it talks about district attorney's offices all around are struggling to recruit and retain lawyers. So it's a national problem. Just a couple of things. Salt Lake City is down 21 to 25 vacancies right now. Maricopa County, Arizona, one of their biggest areas, that's Phoenix, their vacancies increased by 53%. This is from a study done with a dozen top prosecutors in different states. So that is nationwide. Texas is not immune either from this. And what I mean from that is, if you're looking at places around the state, Nueces County, that's Corpus Christi, they're down 13 prosecutors right now. So much so that there's an article written talking about first-year prosecutors trying murder cases in that particular county. Galveston County, a little bit bigger than us, they're down 8 prosecutors right now, meaning they do not have prosecutors in their offices. Tarrant County, Fort Worth, they're down 20 prosecutors right now, meaning that they cannot find prosecutors. Dallas County, the same thing. They are down 20 prosecutors right now. And then Bexar County as well. They're down about 20 prosecutors right now. They've lost 27 since January of this year, meaning they are moving and going to other things that are less stressful, essentially, less work than what they're doing at DA's offices, because the cases are, it's not for the faint of heart. Down to the south of us, Harris County is down 68 prosecutors as of right now. And that is, they're a bigger workforce than we are, but however, 68 prosecutors is a lot. A lot of prosecutors around the state are looking at openings, and what ends up happening is the workload then doubles or triples for the other people who tend to stay there. I say all that to say is that what does that equate to? And that in real time, it equates to injustice. So this is an article from Houston Watch that talks specifically about in 2021, at the end of 2021, there were 8 cases. There were 5 serious cases. There were 3 shootings in D.C. with a child, and an aggravated sex assault case that all returned acquittals at that point in time. The article talks about the reasons for that were, one of the 2 reasons were lack of experience and training, meaning that keeping our prosecutors here results in real-time justice for our constituents and our community. So how did we deal with those things, right? We were not immune from this situation either. We lost 7 prosecutors during COVID. And that doesn't seem like as much as some of the other places. We lost 7 prosecutors. However, that's 33 years of experience that are going other places. They're still prosecuting. They're going to places that are to bigger cities to go for more money at that point in time. We lost last year. I came to you and talked about a juvenile investigator, computer forensics person that would come in and be able to help with cell phones and things like that. We lost that person to the private sector, well, to university, for 3 times the amount of money that we have here. So they're making 3 times what they're doing here. And so, I mean, it's no solution that they, no question why they left what they were doing. What we did with that was we decided to look in-house. We hired an Air Force veteran who worked at College Station PD, who also had a knack for computers and phones, and we started talking, and he wanted to get trained up. And so we used some of our asset forfeiture money to buy one of those supercomputers and get him training. So it's going to be about $12,000 to $15,000, not county money, but out of our asset forfeiture, to go in and train him up to basically do the same type of job that is doing. And so one of the things that I do outside of this is that I go speak in other places on bias. And so I met a guy in Alabama last week who runs the National Computer Forensics Institute. And so he's going to help me try to fast track this person into the computer forensics program so that person get trained up. Their family is here, they are here. So we're trying to do more with less. So we're going to try to have a solve for that particular position. We've already hired for the investigator position. This person was doing our evidence collection and our evidence custodian. So he's also going to double with phone and computer forensics. He also has gotten a chance to testify already, and so he's already been accepted as an expert in Brazos County Court. So it's a win-win for everybody at that point in time. We're happy to say that we don't have any open positions as of July 11th. So we've been able to keep people here, even though the cost of living is higher and things like that. So we are, as of July 11th, we will be full of positions. We're not in a position like many of the other large counties, because one of the things that we have done, in addition to investing in our people, is that we have started our own onboarding process. And so this person right here, this was recognized statewide, came to me and said, we are wanting to start an onboarding process for our new prosecutors. We had to hire brand new prosecutors at a law school, so we had to find a way to train them up. And so they start in felonies. There is no lag time. There's basically no minor leagues. This is real life work. And so she came to us. We developed a program, a 12-week program for our new prosecutors to learn and to be taught all the different things that come along with prosecution, basically our own boot camp, as you will. So they met for 12 weeks at lunch. There were assignments and all those different things. So that helped us create a culture where people want to be here, they're getting good feedback, and the results have been pretty good. So we haven't had some of these dips or drop-offs in justice like they have in some of the other places that I talked about before. What I'm showing you now is just a sample docket. This is the 361st docket for the July 11th. The names on there are not as important. What you see here is basically these are 20 defendants. This is an average trial docket, and 30 cases, 30 felonies right here. So this is what our courts have to be ready for, and this is every other week in all the courts. So all 3 courts are moving at a very, very fast pace. So one of the things that we've also been doing is kind of having these listening sessions with our prosecutors about burnout, about having to go when other people weren't going, because we've been going all the way through while people were at home with their kids. They still were getting ready for trial and all those things. And so that's starting to creep up some. And so we're trying to find ways to give back to them and try to give other outlets for them to, we're learning not just about the trial stuff and the X and O's, but managing them and managing those emotions during the pandemic, and people who've lost people during the pandemic. So like I said, we haven't had a drop off. I'm going to go through a couple of these. Some of these are in your tab. So this is the first tab. I like to break it down into crimes of violence. Quick shout out to my secretary, Jackie, who helped me do this. I started this on Saturday, and about Sunday I was like, this cannot work right. So she came in and did it in like 3 hours. Would have taken me 5 days to do. Rufus Lockett was a capital murder case. We had set for a death penalty. We were ready to go. We had been working with defense counsels at the beginning of this, looked at the evidence, decided on that life without parole would be a better solution in this particular case, and frankly, it saved the county a good bit of money. That usually costs about $1 million in that particular case. Daryl Jackson was a manslaughter case that was tried. It was a 2-week manslaughter case where the defendant essentially killed his brother-in-law. And that caused a whole lot of problems. One is that family members didn't want to testify because it was all the families are intertwined. And the family did so much to not testify, they literally went on the run. So we had to involve the FBI, DPS, tracking devices, pinging phones and things like that in order to get people here. The jury saw through a lot of the different things and ended up convicting the defendant and sentencing him to prison. Ashley White was one that is specifically interesting because these are threats against jail staff, so against county employees, specific threats against county employees, and there were multiple victims here. Also, there were other women that he had threatened and abused, and so we brought all those women back. One woman who literally, it was during the summer, worked at a fast food place probably about 4 miles from here, but did not have transportation, and we did not know that. She literally walked in the hot sun at over 100 degrees down here because it was that important for her to make sure that justice was done in this particular case. And then we drove her back to her job and asked for time off because it was her first day at work. And so she wanted to make sure she was still here. And so it meant that much to people. Kevin Ramos was one at Northgate where a defendant, no criminal history, however, he, for no reason, randomly attacked people for the crime of getting money out of an ATM machine and stabbed them multiple times. So he received the maximum punishment at that point. There were multiple victims in those cases. And so that's just the ones on violent crime. They're more of a description in your packets there, so you can read up about the specific facts of those cases. Not only that, we have been trying cases with crimes against children. That is the second tab that you see. I don't know if you all remember last year we got national recognition. We had Quanell X come up from Houston. This is the one where the baby was buried in the backyard off Highway 21. That was Virginia Adams. That case had been around. I had tried the original case back in 2004. She received 75 years in prison. The other co-defendant died while he was awaiting trial on that particular case. Desiderio Gonzalez and Michael Todd Austin, both of these involved multiple victims. On these particular cases, continuous sexual abuse trial, he received life in prison. Michael Todd Austin was a cold case that was 63 years. Albert Hernandez, multiple victims, 17 years. Tony Palmer was one victim, but there was so much witness tampering. The case took 4 or 5 years because the defendant was the father of the victim, and so the father, the wife, and the girlfriend, and it was a weird thing happening there, all were trying to tamper with the witness to get her to try to recant, but we've ended up seeing through all of that and getting a good verdict as a maximum sentence. Gregory Stanley, if you remember, that was the drama teacher from College Station High School. That case took 2 weeks, got 10 years. There were multiple victims on that particular case. Going through these right here, these are DWI and intoxication offenses. We have a lot of these cases here. Remember, we don't see those unless it's a third or there's a death or a serious injury. And so Stephen Page, that was a DWI third, but that was a fatal crash. And so that defendant was sentenced to 45 years. Pedro Puga, if you remember a case of Carly Beatty, it was a college student who was walking across Texas Avenue and ended up being killed by Pedro Puga. He received 15 years. The family, we worked with them to help publicize their fund, Carly's fund, afterwards, so she was just getting here and was just a bright light for them. We worked closely with the family there. And Angel Morin is one that was 15 years. That's also multiple DWIs. We try to make sure that those cases are prioritized, because you can actually kill a lot of individuals and random individuals. So we don't want that on our streets, especially with 68,000 college students at Texas A&M University, and I believe it's 10,000 at Blinn College. And so why do I put all of these here? One is to say that our prosecutors are working extremely hard, even in the face of COVID and its aftermath. But two is that these results don't happen without our victim assistance coordinators. And so all these cases that have asterisks are cases where there are multiple victims that are coming through, where you're having to juggle all of these different things. And I don't know if you know this, but lawyers may not always be the people that do the best hand-holding. We need people who are good at bringing these victims to trial, because if these victims are uncooperative, then we can't do the job that we do here. So right now, we only have 2 victim assistance coordinators in the budget. One of those, we went out 6 years ago to get a grant for that particular budget, for that particular VAC, because we needed. We had 3 district courts. They cannot be in 2 places at once. And so that additional VAC is grant funded for most of our salary. We have gotten that grant for the past 6 years. I don't think that will, we spoke about this last year. I come to you last year about that. I don't believe we're going to get the grant this year, because there are multiple people applying, and there are a couple of $300,000 projects that are new that were on this particular VOCA grant. And so what we are asking for is, let me back up for a second. I want to add this in. So I'm going to give you a couple of, I don't know if you all remember this one. Happened in February. This case of Jacob Poppy, 7 years for a sexual assault, which is a huge victory on a college campus. In fact, our prosecutors in this particular case have been asked, because of the work they did, to go to an international conference and present at an international conference in Chicago, the International Conference to End Violence Against Women, later on this year. This case right here had victims from Colorado who used to work in New Zealand, and so we were communicating there. We were flying in people from California, flying people in from driving people in from Texas and New York. And so we had witnesses coming literally from all over the country, and essentially all over the world. And this is all handled by our victim assistance coordinators. They're making this happen so our prosecutors can work on the things that they need to work on. They're kind of the unsung heroes. This case right here, it was obviously a high school theater teacher, but what we did not put in here is that one of our victims was from this area. There was another victim from Montgomery, and there's another victim who was, after this whole deal, it messed with him so much, got on drugs, ended up being essentially homeless, and he's living out of his car in Rhode Island. I say that to say we had to get that victim here, which is very hard to do when you don't have a phone, but you have, somehow you go to random places to get on email addresses. And so we had to try to track him essentially from Rhode Island down through Pennsylvania, all the way down here, and get him hotels where we thought that he would be, and then get him back, because he has an insane fear of flying. So we try to fly the victims down. That wasn't going to happen. He is integral to this case, and we take the victims as they are in order to get justice in this particular case. This is all done by our victim assistance coordinators. And so what we're asking for in this particular situation is to fully fund this victim assistance coordinator position. It is necessary for our office. We're in court in all of our, we're in trial in all of our courts every 2 weeks, and we're getting ready, and it's a murderous row of different things. One of the things that happened in COVID is that we stayed efficient by getting rid of the small stuff. So there were a ton of drug cases that went away. Property crime cases, we were able to resolve a ton of those cases to keep afloat. But the big stuff, where it's kids, it's violence, and those things, those cases didn't really go away because people weren't really wanting to go to prison. And so we have a little bit of a backlog on those cases. So everything we have, for the most part, is big. And so we need them on these particular cases. They're responsible for victim meetings, family meetings, travel and hotel arrangements, jury deliberations, sitting with the families during that time. When the victims when there's a plea and the victims want to be here, the victim assistance coordinator walks with them through that process, sits with them through all of that. And so we don't just have the 3 courts. We have 5 divisions. So intake also is being dealt with. and juvenile division. So they cover all of those spots. And so our number one ask is to fully fund that particular position, because we believe that is necessary to the functioning of our office. If we are in this, we want to go to trial. We work more than the other places that I know in the state of Texas. We have to have our victim assistance coordinators with us on those cases. So that's the first ask. So also, I don't know if you guys remember that we were, our EVET conference that's sponsored here, that's all run by our victim assistance coordinators. There's 1,000 people that come here, all run by that. Our local multidisciplinary team at Scotty's House and our human trafficking care coordination team, that's all spearheaded by our victim assistance coordinators. Our second ask is similar. So we have become a leader of statewide on domestic violence and sex assault cases. We've been fortunate. We have gotten a grant since 2015 on this particular thing, and most grants stop being given around 4 years. That's just life. We have been fortunate to get it from 2015 to now. So it's been about 7 or 8 years where we got that grant. The grant has not fully funded the position. The county has funded some of those funds, especially benefits and making up for salary. But we have gone out and sought that money, and we think we've done a pretty good job on it. So what I wanted to do is look at before the grant versus after the grant. And so what we're going to look at numbers before we did our Crimes Against Women unit, and after we've done the Crimes Against Women unit in 2021, and then see the percentage increase between the two numbers. So these are all crimes that have been here. They've all been here. They've been here and they just weren't being investigated and or prosecuted at that point in time because people didn't know what to look for. So before the cases that we filed, you can see, for example, from strangulation cases, those are third-degree felonies. Those cases before would be considered misdemeanors. Because if you didn't know what to look for, they would just be considered they had pain and wouldn't know the signs and symptoms of strangulation or how dangerous it is. We went from filing 3 of those to 40 of those, and that's 1,233% increase. Sex assault felonies, which is something that we've tried to make a priority here. We went from 1 to 9, which thank goodness that it's low because we don't want to have more of those, but that's an 800% increase. Assaults with a prior. These are all cases that would still be here, and they were happening before. There's no reason that they were more happening in 2015 than they are in 2021. The police know just what to look for. 323% increase in those cases being filed. Bond conditions, and so I'm going to put a pin on that one because we're going to talk a little bit about a letter from one of the JPs. We've worked really closely with the JPs on establishing bond conditions because what happens is they come in, defendants get arrested, they get out, and they go right back to the spouse, and then the police are right back out there again and for violating it because they're assaulting the people again. We went and talked and got a survey with Bryan PD and said, hey, what is the most frustrating thing about what we do? It's like going out to the same house over and over and over again and trying to talk to these people, and we try to arrest, and they're back out the next day, and they're going back. And so we worked with the judges to try to say, hey, not only are you arrested, but you are not supposed to be back at this particular home unless you come back to a judge and give sufficient reason why that's necessary. And so we've been able to prosecute those cases, and that's been an 1,850% increase. So a total of we've had a 473% increase. We've indicted four times the amount of felonies. But it's one thing to talk about it, it's another thing to actually be about it, which these are the disposed cases, which means it's not just us saying it or a grand jury saying it, it is the defendants pleading to or juries backing us up on what we're saying has happened. And you can see here in these numbers that the disposal rates have increased by 117% for continuous family violence, that's assaulting someone 2 or more times in a 12-month period, strangulation, a 400% increase in convictions, aggravated assault, a 417% increase, sex assault felonies, our convictions, 1,400% increase in those convictions. And felony VPOs, which is what we talked about before, a 2,400% increase in the amount of convictions that we have had. So we've been able to do this because of the hard work of the people on the team, but it's not just in the courtroom. Because I want to go to sex assaults for a little bit. These assaults came into us because the Crimes Against Women unit also handles adult sex assaults. These came into us initially as refusals, meaning that the police at the beginning did not believe that these were actual crimes. And after we went and our investigator got onto them and started working the cases, these people are now in prison because of this, when they initially came to us as they would have been let back out on the streets. And so we keep a list of these because we want to make sure that many times when there's one victim that comes in, there's usually 2 or 3 more that are waiting in the wings that need more investigation. And we understand that the police in Bryan and College Station are overworked because they have a ton of cases. But these are some that are we see as kind of badges of honor because these individuals were initially going to be let go. The top one, we actually worked with, it was actually Hollywood because we worked with NCIS. Mark Harmon did not come down with us, but an NCIS investigator came down and said, hey, these are some things that was happening in the military because there were sex assaults that were happening in the military that caused him to get kicked out that we did not know about and the police did not know about. We worked with those investigators to get this person in prison because he was perping on a young lady in Northgate. And so he had done something overseas, and then we had this thing happen here. So I thought that was really good in terms of the hard work that they put in. But in order to do that, we had to till the ground, meaning that we had to train up all these other people on domestic violence. And so here are just some of the things that we have done when it comes to training people in terms of domestic violence. So we train nurses in terms of testify on signs and symptoms for domestic violence. The DV expert, we trained up the DV expert at Twin City Mission, the 911 dispatchers, police agencies. We know we train on police agencies. We work with the JPs, we talked about that. We're training new police officers. We applied for and received a grant for the high risk team, which is our worst of the worst offenders. So they are extremely violent, and it's a community approach. We work with all the police agencies and community partners to make sure we monitor them and monitor their victims so their victims don't come up missing. This one is actually my fault because this says Dell Children's, and I didn't read the email correctly. When I said before is that we train the nurses at Scott and White in order to know how to testify. The word has gotten out about that, and so it's not Dell Children's Hospital. So I apologize. It's McLean Children's Hospital now heard what we did and wants us to train their nurses. So the Children's Hospital, I believe that is in Temple, wants us to train their nurses on how to testify. And many times our serious cases, if they can't be handled here, they go to McLean Children's. So we'll be working with those individuals as well. Not only that, the process that we created of training those nurses and things like that has been picked up, and now UNT Health Science Center wants us to train their DNA analysts on testimony as well. And so if you didn't know, we work with and received a grant, I guess is what you call it, from Texas A&M University to train sex assault nurses. And so they bring in sex assault nurses from around the state and some contiguous states, and come in to learn what it's like to testify in a courtroom, because one of the main reasons why nurses leave the profession is the fear of testimony. And so it's helped us a ton. They teach us a ton about the body, and then we teach them about how to testify in court. They get directed, they get cross-examined. This is extra time out of our prosecutor schedules to do this, but I think it pays dividends for them. It's intrinsically, it helps them, but also it helps them become better testifiers wherever they go. So we have a statewide impact. DNA analysts in UNT want us to do the same thing for them. So we're trying to work that out now where we can do that when we don't have a trial going, and go train their analysts as well. So these are just some of the things that we have seen here in our area. Terry Ratliff is one that's a murder case. We're going to talk about a little bit of these, but this happened in 21-22. So some of these you may have heard on the news. I won't go through all of them, but there is a couple I want to go through in specifically. Terry Ratliff, this defendant had a case in Madison County with the same victim. They moved to Brazos County and killed the victim here in Brazos County and fled to Midland, his hometown. And so we didn't have any evidence. It was a circumstantial case. We sent our Crimes Against Women prosecutor investigator out to Midland to interview people, and not only did they find evidence out there on this particular case, but a trail of victims that were out in Midland that had not been found yet. And so the case went from a circumstantial case to a maximum plea agreement. And what I mean by that is that 60 years to 99 years in prison is the exact same thing for TDC purposes. So 50 years as a plea agreement to waive all appeals, any chance of getting out, saves a defendant only 5 years before they're eligible for parole. That's it. So in our county, most places, a maximum plea is 35 or 40 years. Our maximum is 50. And so that's basically, it's the exact same in Texas law as a life sentence. And so it went from that to, they were asking us for a plea agreement at 50 years on that particular case. Craig Burleson. Craig Burleson was originally from Houston, and he assaulted his ex-girlfriend in front of their child outside the home. She was initially uncooperative, worried about how her child would feel about her turning against her father. Absolutely understandable. We had a neighbor who just happened to see the argument and was filming it. And then he was worried about retaliation, so he became uncooperative. So we had to get our VAC to coax them to come in. Investigators passed and realized he was a suspect in an unsolved murder in Harris County. So we went down to Harris County, got those reports, got the videos, and proved up the murder case in punishment here in Brazos County. That case is still pending in Harris County. So they wanted us to go first because they weren't going to try that case anytime soon, and who knows when they're going to try it in Harris County. And he received life here, not just for the assault, but for all the different things that we proved beyond a reasonable doubt that he had also committed a murder down there. And these are some of the people that are coming into our county. Ben Arevalo, this is one you may have seen on the news. He had kidnapped his girlfriend, but then she tried to escape, and he dragged her out of a convenience store off on William Joe Bryan, right down there by the Wendy's. And fled in the vehicle. In the middle of trial, he left the trial and was caught trying to enter Mexico. So we had to go and get all the helicopters and all the things to try to look for him. He was trying to enter Mexico that time. They finally found him. We put out a work. This is all the work that our Crimes Against Women team is doing down there. So a couple of these things we worked with, and this is a letter in your packet from the Justices of the Peace. You'll see the letter now. In full disclosure, 3 of the Justices of the Peace have signed the letter. There's not a signature by Judge Vasquez. The only reason for that is because there was a typo in the original letter, and so we realized the typo, and then we couldn't get in contact with her. So she's on board too. So I just want to make sure, for purposes of the record, she's on board as well. We've worked with them. Judge Hill is the one that spearheaded it, and we've worked with them on bond conditions and implementing measures to help ensure the safety of victims. So there's a letter in there of support from the JPs. Dr. Mitchell is a Center of Nursing Excellence, the people that we did the trainings with. And they talk about how that's a substantial gap if there's not continued funding for the county's ability to seek justice for victims and holding offenders accountable. And so she's a kind of spearhead. She's also spearheading an adult forensic interviewing center right now, which is in the works for our adult sex assault victims, so that they can be interviewed essentially the same way that Scotty's House victims are. So she is spearheading that. We're working with her on that as well, along with the Sheriff's Office. MHMR, one of the things that is not well known is that we work really closely with MHMR, especially in domestic violence cases. And one of the things that they said, and this is in there as well, this is in tab, just to make sure you know, tab 4, I believe, or tab 5, excuse me. All of these letters are in there, they're copies of them. But she said that we've been able to work with the prosecutor and the courts to implement special conditions, ordering mental health treatment and medication management, improving outcomes for both the defendant and their victims, meaning we're not just putting people away. And a lot of times with our mental health caseload, and when they commit domestic violence cases, it's not a matter of just putting them in prison. We're having to give them this treatment, and whether that be probation or working with MHMR, that they need so they can not reoffend and they can be out in the world being productive and making sure their medication's correct, and that their victims feel like they're safe as well. And so we've had to do competency restoration, competency hearings, working closely with MHMR to make sure that we're both improving both victim and defendant outcomes. Nikki Johnson is one of our she's a forensic nurse program coordinator at Scott & White, and she can tell you that the myths and misunderstandings that are often present, law enforcement, prosecutors, members of the public, is rampant. They have helped us to learn, but we've also helped them learn about the importance of medical treatment and testimony, and so that we can get justice in these particular cases. And then one of the things I talked about, the high-risk team before, David Scott is the policy coordinator for the Texas Council on Family Violence, a statewide organization. They've given us this grant. They use our people as a model to teach other people how to do the high-risk team. So all this stuff is kind of behind the scenes and just tilling the ground, but we've worked together to get all these people on one accord so that we can go after these cases so that the percentage increases from 2015 to 21 can actually happen. They don't happen without the work of the Crimes Against Women unit. So the second ask is to fully fund the VAWA prosecutor and the investigator. In my opinion, they invest tons of time and energy into prosecuting violent and dangerous criminals here. Obviously there's a price on everything, and you all are experts in this particular area. In my opinion, there's not a price on the safety of the community of women and children in our area. The countless hours of training other community partners and recognize and respond to our biggest driver of violent crime, to me, is a huge priority here. There is no other violent crime that's more than domestic violence here in Brazos County. This is our biggest driver, and this is our weapon to fight it. So this is an ask. It's really one ask in terms of fully funding the grant positions, this last two, but I wanted to spend some time there to talk about what they do so that you can have a full understanding of what I'm asking for in this particular area. I'm going to ask any questions on this one before I move to the other ones.
So do you don't believe that those grant funds would be available for?
So for the VOCA funds, there were two $300,000 projects that graded out ahead of us. And we've got it for 6 years. And so right now I believe that we're 6, so I don't believe that we're going to get that. We graded out first in the VAWA grant fund. However, the VAWA grant RBE, I think that's reasonable budget estimate, for our region is only $54,000 this year. And so that scares me in terms of this, which is why we talked about it last year. I wanted to get this swallowed up, is that I don't want to lose the work that's been done by this unit for no other fault of there's not grant funds here, because those positions have to go at that point in time. And so $54,000 does not pay for the prosecutor or investigator for this particular thing. So that is why we asked last year. We got the grant fully funded last year, so that was great for us. But I don't see that happening this year with $54,000. Nina, you gonna say something?
Regarding the grants, say for instance for FY22, the total budget for the grants were $345,052. The county has been helping to pay for the salaries and benefits for both of them, which has been half. So we've been making transfers from the general fund to the grant fund about $150,000 a year. If we do receive this one grant in the amount of $54,000, and that's a big if, we would still have to help cover close to $314,000 in salary and benefits. And so, and if we get the $54,000 is a big question mark.
I mean, I realize that with grants, there's a lot of work and effort that goes in on, turning in reports and doing all those things, and and maybe you have proven that these programs work and are sure successful, and I think they have enough value that if necessary, we probably would fund them. My preference would be if that grant fund were available, and if it's worth the effort to do it, that we'd go for grants first. But if there's just not enough money, it looks like it's going to be available to, in the bucket, then maybe we do move forward with funding. I don't know.
Well, I would say that's perfectly fine with us. If we got the grant, then that's great for us. At some point in time, the grant's going to run out, and I don't want to be in a position of holding back after we've done as much work as we can in this particular area. Like I said, we just got the word yesterday that we got asked, because of the work that we do here in this grant position, to go and talk about it on the world stage. And this is Brazos County going, like, that's the amount of time and energy that they're putting into this that's actually paying off. So I don't want to lose that momentum and then lose those people to other places where they benefit from that experience that they got here. So, oh yes, ma'am.
One more thing. We normally do not hear regarding the award of the grants until after we adopt budget. And so if we leave them in the crime fund, if we leave them in the grant fund, and we get word that we did not get award, did not get awarded the grants, then we could come back to the court and ask to transfer the positions back to general fund. If we adopt with the positions in general fund and receive the grants,
That would be supplanting if we.
we will not be able
So,
to use the funds in the
I
first
mean,
place.
my
So-
preference would be if there's still enough value to go after the grants, would be to go after the grants and then deal with it in the future if we're not successful in getting those grants.
As long as I
Unless there's just not enough money there to make it worth the effort that you have to go through to get in the grant. I don't know. I mean,
Well, in this case, Jarvis prepares the grant application
yeah.
and maintains all the statistics with regards to the cases and the objectives of the grant.
We send all that stuff in, and even with that, I mean, the grant, we graded out first in the Vowel grant. It's not even that. We're first in our region. It is just, this is the regional budget estimate of what they say they're going to give our region.
And the grant that he might receive might cover just for the investigator, not for the investigator and the attorney.
Mhm.
So we can leave one position in the grant side, ask the county to absorb the other two positions. We still will have to transfer some money to help out with the salary benefits for the investigator. At least it won't be that big of a sticker shock. So there's several ways that we could look at it at the end of the day.
So that's the first ask, is fully funding those 3 positions. And however we get there, it doesn't, I'm not concerned how we get there or how we do it. That's not really the point, is that I don't want to lose those positions.
okay.
So those are in the office right now, helping us do justice. Next, I want to talk about juvenile. And so we've had a tied in juvenile crime, and just to kind of let us know just a little bit about the backdrop. I've been here 20 years. I'll be 20 years in September. We have had 2 prosecutors in juvenile that entire time. I talked with Katie Peterson. I don't know if anybody remembers Katie Peterson. Her husband now is one of the judges on the Court of Criminal Appeals. She was a prosecutor in our office when I first got here. And she said when she was an intern in Judge Delaney's office, they still had 2 prosecutors. That was back in 1996. So I know for 2002, it was 2 prosecutors. Back to 1996, that is what I got from her. So population increase from 2000 to now, according to our estimates, is about 84,500. With that burgeoning, people coming to Aggie Land, we've had a rise in different crimes. And so this letter is here. This is from Chief Buskey at Bryan Police Department, just talking about the rise in juvenile crime, and they've seen it, and that there's a number of juveniles committing crimes. Shots fired, we're going to talk about those a little bit, and theft crimes, our burglary of motor vehicles. A lot of those are being committed by juveniles. Now, some of that's aided by our citizens sometimes because they don't lock their doors and they leave their guns and their iPads in their cars in the front seats. However, there's still a rise in crime that we have been seeing. And so that's a huge deal for us. And so when I talked to him about this, he was all on board and saying that having another person in there. So what I'm going to do is kind of explain what juvenile does compared to the adult side of the equation. Because
Mm-hmm.
juvenile, you don't see a lot of stuff in the paper because of juvenile. So we cannot publicize what's happening over there. So this is back from 2019. So long before I came here talking about this, that we were concerned about the rise in juvenile crime. We'd had a ton of these types of issues. This is from 2021. We had, when I was in, most of our juveniles were doing things like burglaries, thefts, and maybe some assaults at school. We had more types of shootings. With the access of weapons, we've had more people getting access to those weapons, using them in robberies, and then what we call drug rips, or where they're robbing the drug dealers for their money, or the drug dealers are making a deal and then robbing the users for their money. So we've had more of these type deals where juveniles are suspects. This is one where we made an arrest in that same shooting investigation. Right there, this is all juvenile. So when you see that, you don't see names. 9 times out of 10, that's a juvenile that's involved. This is one where we've had a whole nother thing where I had to go out and do actual PSAs with College Station ISD. So after Parkland, after the Michigan shootings, we also see what's called, this is in the theory and research, that copycats. So people make threats about going to shoot up schools and things like that. And we know that they happen, and we experienced a serious uptick to the point where College Station ISD asked me to do a PSA saying that this is not funny and you will be prosecuted for these things. And we have had I did not do the numbers on this, but I would say it is 100-fold increase in the amount of threats at schools about kids, either A, joking that they were going to shoot up schools, or B, bringing some sort of weapon to school, whether it be knives, whether that be guns, whether threatening to be guns, things on social media, Snapchat, Facebook, Twitter, all of those different things. And so our 2 juvenile prosecutors have to deal with that as well. This is juvenile burglaries. We've had a ton of those. Here's an article on KBTX from December of 2021 that they go through, and you're able to knock out a bunch of burglaries all at one time. So many times they hit big apartment complexes, and they just hit the doors. And many times if the doors unlocked, they're not breaking doors as much anymore, but they're also just hitting doors, opening them up, and then taking whatever inside. And they can go through 200 cars in a night. And and they work in packs. Sometimes they come up from other counties, but many times they may be homegrown juveniles. This is the shot from Pepper Tree. I think this was the Pepper Tree shooting, and this was a lot of kids out in the street, and there was a fight, and then there were guns that got pulled. There were 3 people who got shot. 2 of them were 17 and 18 years old, but there's also a juvenile that's involved in that one as well. And so these are higher level crimes that require serious attention by our office, because we also handle the juvenile crime. We're one of the few offices in the county that handle juvenile crimes. In the state that handle juvenile crimes. Most of the time that's handled by the county attorney. So what the juvenile prosecutor does is search warrants and arrest warrants. They're reviewing those. They're reviewing the arrest to determine if probable cause exists to hold them in detention. They're creating and filing petitions. That's basically like a juvenile indictment. Reviewing probation reports for violations. So they're doing all of that, basically. This is what our adult intake prosecutors do, and we have 3 of those that just do intake. 1 of them does pretrial diversion. We'll talk about that in a little bit, and also does our drug intake, but this is what our adult intake prosecutors do right here exclusively. But in addition to this, our 2 juvenile prosecutors, they're doing all of this, but they're also doing this. They're in detention hearings 4 mornings a week, from 8 to about 11:30. They're doing deferred prosecution hearings, revocation hearings of juveniles probation. They're doing pretrial diversion. They're doing bench trials, which are trials to the judge. That can be in front of any of the 3 district court judges or Judge Swan. And they're doing jury trials. So those jury trials are set once a month. So they're doing the equivalent of what my trial prosecutors are doing, and they're doing what my intake prosecutors are doing, and there's only 2 of them. And so it is a huge burden at that point in time. What I'm asking at that point in time is want to bring it into the modern age to have a person that just does the intake for the juvenile cases. So they're creating the new petitions and the misdemeanors and felony cases, because we have both of those cases in our office. Search warrants and arrest warrants, and reviewing them to determine if there's probable cause that exists to determine them, and have the other 2 prosecutors function as essentially the trial prosecutors, where they're having the hearings, they're in court every day, answering phone calls from the juvenile probation officers on old cases, and then the new prosecutors answering juvenile probation questions on new cases. So that way they can all do the same thing. The burden of the juvenile prosecutor now to be able to do everything, and to be the intake prosecutor, the trial prosecutor, and do sealing indictments, sealing dockets and like that, I think it's too much for that, especially with the rise in crime. So right now we have 2 prosecutors. There's 2 defense lawyers on the juvenile contract, but there's also 9 other defense lawyers that handle juvenile cases. And so they're responsible for all of those hearings and all of those cases with these 11 lawyers that they deal with pretty much on a regular basis. The juvenile contract handles a lot of those cases, but they don't handle all of them. And so they're having to deal with all the discovery and things like that for all the juvenile cases that are out there. And with the rise in crime that we've seen, with the inevitable increase in population, I think that it's time to act. In 20 years, I think it's time to add a juvenile prosecutor to the ranks. So that is the juvenile prosecutor right there. My last one is something I've talked to you about. We talked about it last year, and back in 2019, you allowed us to have a 3rd intake lawyer to work on pretrial diversion and pre-indictment pleas. And so the goal was to rehabilitate low-level, nonviolent drug offenders, and to ensure that one of our other goals was to ensure that money doesn't equate to unequal justice. What I mean by that is that in other counties, there are many times where the only people that are eligible for a pretrial diversion are individuals who can pay for a private lawyer. And so we did not want to have that because their cases are pre-indictment. They have an attorney that's retained. They can come to the DA's office and give a bunch of letters that say, my guy is a really, really good guy. See, this is from his pastor, this is from his coach, and all those different things, which they're absolutely allowed to do. The problem is that the individual who doesn't have the connection, who doesn't have the money, who doesn't have any of those things, can't make that pitch. And so what ends up happening is that people with money get a second chance, and people who don't get put into the system. So what we tried to do was do something different to where we built an affirmative criteria and then reach out to individuals who meet the criteria regardless of income. And so that has worked out well for us. And so our stats are different than some other stats. There's one county we went to go and look at their processes, and it is a minority county in Texas, a big county, and 60% of the people on pretrial diversion over 60% were Anglo. And it is any lawyer at any point in time can do it, and so it's just the defense lawyer. What we learned with defense lawyers get to the prosecutors, and that's the people who get the deal. So we have built this criteria, and then we reach out to defense lawyers and say, hey, your person qualifies for this particular thing. And what we've seen is that our results mirror our population, which I think is a good thing. So low-level felonies, little or no criminal history, they confess to the crime. They successfully complete the program. We've added two things. One is $250 that they pay, and this would go back to the general fund to help pay for this program. And two, if they complete the program, they're eligible for immediate expungement, which means it's off their record, which means they can start clean again, no questions asked. They've completed the program, and the slate is wiped clean. This has been a hit with our defense lawyers and our people who are our defendants. So we added an intake lawyer. Here's what we've done. 245 individuals have either gone through the program or are going through it right now. 70% are 17 to 24 years old, which means these are young individuals who was their first time hitting the system with low-level drug crimes. We're looking to try to expand that to reach more people. And this right here is a study out of Harris County that talks about tools like pretrial diversion, deferred adjudication can significantly increase job opportunities for young individuals who've made small mistakes but don't need to be saddled with a criminal conviction. This is a 2020 study that looked at stuff over 10 years. But what we've done is that we've taken it a step further, and that we have worked with Baylor University, and this is in your packet. This is the last thing in your packet. There's a research letter there. So we are in the middle of a study with Baylor University, and we have Jonathan Stewart is a economics professor there. He's working on his PhD, and he's doing this as, I think, part of his dissertation to collaborate to determine if there's cost savings on a pretrial diversion program here in Brazos County. So we've given him access to our numbers. This is a small sample, but the numbers are here for you at the very back. It's 19 pages as of right now. But we've looked at 4 groups of people: those who've been through the program, those who failed out of the program, those who were eligible and opted out of the program, and then those who would have been eligible if the program was available. And so he's looked at the things, the individuals there. There are a couple things that he has not talked about, so this is a very conservative estimate. The things that aren't considered: trial costs, which are a lot for somebody that doesn't go through the program, jail costs, recidivism, social services, and attorney's fees paid to private attorneys. So those are things that were not considered in this right here. But even with that, it says that the cost analysts show that the pretrial diversion program is consistent with the literature, finding a reduction in recidivism and reducing estimated cost by about $520 per case, with a range of anywhere between $146 to $2,000. So that's theirs it's on June 17th of 2022. There's going to be a full-length study done hopefully later on this year. When that gets done, I will present that to the Commissioner's Court. But I think that the argument of whether or not this is saving money and rehabilitating individuals is borne out through the initial data. And so what we're asking you to do is that we would like to expand this program for a number of reasons. One, it helps to give Brazos County citizens a second chance. This right here, down here, is a excerpt from an email we got from one of the defense lawyers about one of his clients, just talking about how he was in tears and was so grateful for the opportunity. And he said this was a good way to touch the stove without losing a hand. And this was a 20-year-old, and said he had definitely learned his lesson. So this 20-year-old can go back into the job market and get a good job based on the fact that he has gotten a second chance in Brazos County. And the diversion success rate is about 80%, which means we're picking the right people who are coming through the program, and they have changed lives, and they're not coming back and recommitting more felonies. So this right here is a letter from one of our defense lawyers, Jim James. And so this is also in your packet. But part I have right here, I think is good. It says that he's seen in his, it's one of the best programs that he's seen in his half century of practicing law. It helps to have this, to make sure the cases don't go on court dockets. And it saves the county, in his opinion, thousands of dollars in court cost savings and administrative costs, and reduces the dockets, because most of these cases are set at least 3 to 5 times before they're ever resolved. Which I think, if that case is not on the court's dockets, that helps the court not have to expand if they don't want to. So since we've had this in October 2019, we've disposed of over 640 cases. That does not include the 245 people that are in the diversion program. So we're talking about at least 800 people who have not been on our court's dockets, who are gone, they're back into society, doing their thing, and without adding them at all to any docket at all. And the average amount of felonies that a prosecutor has is somewhere around 150 to 200 felonies per person. So you're talking about the caseload of about 2 to 3 prosecutors. So that is what we've been able to do between pre-indictment pleas, which means people that don't qualify for the diversion program, but they don't need to be on a court's docket, their user amounts of drugs, and our diversion program that gives people a second chance. So just the last thing, as an intake, we indict about 150 felonies a month. That's a lot of felonies that we have here. Even with that, that's 2 grand juries a month. That goes from about 8 to about 3 o'clock, because that's how the grand jury section goes. 150 felonies a month. Current cases that are sitting in intake right now, even doing that right there at 150 felonies a month, is about 1,200 cases that are sitting there that we haven't even got a chance to get to yet. That's the amount of crime that's happening here in Brazos County. The amount of cases that in that 1,219 that are user amounts of drugs, so we went back and looked, less than a gram, 1 to 4 grams, is 505, or 40% of those cases that we have sitting there are user amounts of drugs, which are people who may be eligible for a pre-indictment plea or pretrial diversion. But then we went further to look and see how many of those people have little or zero criminal history and have a small amount of drugs. And so we went in and looked at the data, and that is over 100 individuals. So 100 individuals right now in intake right now that we could get on this program if we had the manpower to do so, to give them a second shot at life, and over 500 that we can go and put them on regular probation and get them out because they don't need to be in our jails at all, to hopefully save time in these other areas. And so I think it's worth expanding in this particular area, but those are the raw numbers that we have for the pretrial diversion program. This is one of those weird places where defense attorneys like it, prosecutors like it, the defendants like it. Everybody seems to like the program. They get their rehabilitation, they get their slap on the hand, but they also get a chance to make a new start. And it gives prosecutors not just a chance to go and lock people up, but also gives them a chance to go and do something, go help some people. So we want to try to expand it, do it responsibly, but that's our last ask, is to add on to that program. Now, priority 1, like there's levels to this. Priority 1, like I said before, is to fully fund the VOC and VOW grants. Priority 2 is the juvenile prosecutor. Priority 3 is the pretrial diversion prosecutor. I think that they're all worthy areas. I didn't come this time to talk about salaries or anything like that. The reason was because these needs are super important, and I wanted to make sure that all our ducks in a row, because I wanted to look at what salaries are comparative to where we are in other counties that are about our size, but also look at counties where our people are leaving to go to. because we've had people leave during that time and where they're going to, and so that's for another day, that's for another year. I'm not worried about that as much. I'm worried about the actual people in the office and the rise in crime here, and giving us a chance to kind of knock those cases off our docket. I think that we've done well with what we've had, what you've given us. You guys have trusted us with a lot, and we appreciate that. And so what we're asking for, you have this research here, you have this big book here so you can read through the things. If you have extra questions, please let me know. We try to not just say stuff, but also bring data to justify why we want to do what we want to do. So if you have any questions. Yes, ma'am.
I know we've graded out first on the BAWA grant, but are you applying for the VOCA grant again?
Yes. We applied for both grants on both of those.
Well, I know we're third for the VOCA grant.
Okay.
Behind the $300,000
Okay.
asks,
Yes.
yeah.
So we would yes, we've applied for both of them.
Okay.
So if we got them, then that would be great, and I'll come to you and be like, "Whoo, happy, joy." But if we don't, we have to have those people in our office. Any other questions?
Do you have any other grants in the making, or?
I have not, and so when I started this process back in 2015, I went to Katie, and I'm like, Katie, I want to do some grants. She was like, you do not know what you were asking for at that time. And I was like, no, here's what we need to do. And I came back to her this time and said, Katie, we need to talk. And she just started giggling. So we haven't done that. We haven't stretched on that part right there yet, only because we want to make sure that this is secure first. There's a lot of other grants that are out there. I have to tell you that we started our human trafficking care coordination team and started training people on human trafficking. Surprise, surprise, we got it. We just didn't know. We'd fall into it because somebody would see an ad somewhere on Facebook, and then we'd realize that there is some sort of prostitution ring and there was human trafficking involved. Now that we're training people, we got people coming out of the woodworks now. So there's human trafficking grants out there. There's a lot of crime that's out there that we have tried to work on, but we don't want to get too stretched so thin to where we got grants all these other areas and something bad happens.
Okay,
So
thank you.
Jarvis, you said something when we were talking about a pretrial diversion fee.
yes. So the pretrial diversion fee that we have is that we added this because obviously this thing costs money, and so it is not a huge expense. We don't want to make it a perverse incentive, but under the law, you can charge up to $500 in a pretrial diversion fee to help supplement the cost of pretrial diversion. We've just implemented to where we're going to add $250 to any case that involves pretrial diversion. Now that would be paid out over a year, so it's not that much money per month. However, that person still has to pay his probation fees and things like that. But they add a $250 fee, so every case that comes through, that goes back into the general coffers to try to help pay for this program.
And how many cases do you think that would apply to?
As of right now,
Annually?
right now in intake, right now there are 109 cases that would be pre-child diversion eligible right now. If I could have I could do them right now. So those cases continue to increase, and they will increase
Think
as
we could count on 200?
Say what now?
Think we could count on
Yes.
200?
Easy. I think we can. If we have another person to do it, yeah, we can count on 200.
No, can you count on another 200 without another person?
Without another person, I wouldn't be able to. I don't know if I can get to them.
So you
without
think the
other person.
109 might be it?
So the 109 may be it, but these will increase exponentially as the students get back. So there'll be a ton more cases because people come back, and wherever they're doing their
They get way too
marijuana and
happy.
things like that.
Yeah.
Yes, they get a little too happy here. So the 109 we could get by the next session of the next budget session. But when we get to the 109, what I can do is I can give you an update as to how those people are doing, and then how many others have been added that would fit the bill at that point in time.
Well, I went ahead and put in $50,000 in the revenue budget, which is
Okay.
200 times 250.
That, I need a calculator real quick.
That's 250,
That's 50,000,
200
yeah.
cases.
Yeah.
That was the lowest number I saw on all your stuff.